Game one here as our day gets started. And here we are in the upper left in the red. He's playing for Twisted Minds. Odds on favorite, but we'll see what happens. His name is Classic. And the bottom right in the blue for Dragon Kite's Gaming, it's Oliveira.
All right, well, we get to start off on Oceanborn. Keeps things pretty reasonable for us to kick things off as far as what we can expect. You can do pretty much anything here. Third base as a reasonable option. We do have Classic going out with the probe to check for any sort of early proxy shenanigans, and he's also got his wall set up in the main base to give himself the option to block any possible Reaper Scout that might come up. What do you like from Oliveira here? From what you've been seeing out of his matchup, still a lot of the typical one Reaper into Mind Drop for him. Is he trying to go for faster bioplay, or are we seeing anything else? This game, he did get the quick depot unfinished just to block that probe scout. So he kind of wants Classic to have to assume a little bit about his opener, including this Marine start too. So the gas is not going to go to that Reaper.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at Oliveira. He's been trying when we talk about how he played in the Asian regional, which is where we got to see a lot of his games. He was trying a bunch of different things. We saw him go for a lot of, like, say, 3 racks aggression, trying to granted that's Ghost River, it's a different map, that's a very, very quick rush distance. But we see him go for a lot of, like, the 6-minute stim timings, these aggressive options that try to get under the skin of the Protoss player before they're properly ready. And now, granted, you know, that build, that style, 6-minute stim, 6:30, something like that, Nate, that was something that was a revelation, something that was new and allowed Ryung to make top 12 of Katowice like 3 years ago. Protoss players, for the most part now, they have it a little bit more figured out. But even still, throwing these different wrinkles, going Marine first and spending your gas elsewhere, can make life just a little bit more complicated for Classic.
Yeah, I feel like as far as putting pressure onto Protoss players is concerned, one of the best examples we've seen of that more recently has been, I'm just going to invoke the name again, Clem. You know, we've seen some of those early Marine pushes with the fast Cyclone to follow it up, and you don't have stim, you don't have anything fancy, no big mine typically with that or siege tank, but you just kind of apply this pressure and use heavy amounts of micro to dodge stalker shots and get a lot of work done. Whether we see something like that as the Cyclone does boot up for Oliveira is one thing. Getting map control against the early adepts and stalkers on the map. If you don't, you know, before stim is done, before medevacs are done, the Cyclone is really the only unit that's going to give you that. But at the same time, it has vulnerabilities to pretty much all the tech units that Protoss has. So I kind of like the second barracks tucked in the back. He's going to have that Cyclone to make it look like, yeah, I'm going up for this tech, but he still has the 2-1-1 set up very nicely, so gives him a little bit of options. But I think, like you were saying for Classic, he's chilling at home. He's got a shield battery up at the natural, and with the adept up front, he kind of knows, all right, there's a little bit of a timer before anything can be coming his way, since as we've seen, it's 3 racks. He actually hasn't gotten the starport at all, Behemoth.
Yeah, that's really interesting as we were looking at this, because I was expecting, okay, 2 second racks hidden, starport, we're gonna go for 2-1-1. You're hitting like 5:30, and again, it's just something meant to get under the skin of the Protoss and make them not as comfortable, not as happy as they might otherwise be. But this hits just a little bit faster. 3 Marines coming out at a time. Stim's gonna be done soon. We're getting tanks into this, and this is Oliveira getting ready for a really strong early game push. Maybe not before Blink is done, because Classic is getting that. He's chronoing that out. That'll be ready. But again, maybe lacking the starport tech, but having stim, combat shield, all of these Marines, all of these tanks. And the good news for Classic, as we talk about what's happening here, this is a relatively delayed third base. He's going up to 3 gates, sure, fine. But it's 4:30, and there's no third base up. Classic, don't know that he knows exactly what's happening here, Nate, but it seems like he's got some inkling.
It would be the time, right? It would be. And I think that that's the frustrating part of the opener, because he was able to barely see the factory with that adept shade so much earlier. And the alarms that go off in your head for as far as what you're going to have to deal with, if it's going to be, oh, that mine drop, okay, well, they see the time of the factory. I think I know when it finished. I can try to assume when the medevac would roughly be coming in, but I still need to know from what angle. So even just that little bit of information denial, he does have the third now going up, but you're spot on that. Anywhere between that 330, 420 mark is when Protoss is usually looking to take that. But because Oliveira didn't have the starport, I was going to say he kind of has to make a move out, and we see the Adepts, or sorry, the Stalkers grab 2 of the Marauders right as they're leaving. But did he see the rest of the army? Is he prepared for this push? Because it's still going to be a lot. There's no medevacs, but there's a reason for that. And it's all those extra Marines and now these SCVs being pulled with it too.
Yeah, it is scary. Classic saw it on the Observer. Well, we don't know if he saw it, but it was visible under the Observer. So his answer is like, look, I got to buy some time here. My third base it's kind of a dummy bag, and I'm going to let it go down. And yeah, there we go. Colossus canceled. Disruptor's on the way. He needs to buy the time for this. He's got Stalkers on the other side trying to make some havoc, and SCVs have fallen, Nate. But now they got to find their way back home. This is Robo getting a lot of damage, but Stalkers blink on top, trying to take advantage of where the damage is not. And the first tank's going to go down, second one as well, but everything is dead, so realistically, who cares?
Yeah, I was going to say he was supply blocked for about 5 seconds there. The Disruptor just barely not able to finish as a result. And I mean, yeah, you can use the photon overcharge on the shield battery here and pop that up, but the probes are not going to be able to sustain damage from this many Marines. He said it's a tremendous amount of work done. 19 probes picked off. Let's not forget the third base is off the table too. So this is just all gravy for Oliveira. 2-base Terran versus 2-base Protoss, and you're taking out their primary tech structure. Well, you're just feeling great at this point, man.
Yeah, and the best thing about this as well is there's only one production. There's only one gateway of production as well. Yes, the Stalkers get the tank, and yeah, this timing looks like it's slowly petering out. Notice Oliveira at this point. He's killing probes. He's not killing Stalkers anymore. This is all about maximizing the damage. But again, classic, not a lot of production. And the cool thing about this, we saw from Oliveira, this was not one of our standard timings, right? As a Protoss player, you're used to, okay, 6:30. That's going to be a 3-1-1 type of setup. That's a stim timing, sure, fine. But there's a third base beyond it, 7:30. That's a 3-1-1. Third base is a little bit more delayed, a little bit more army. I know my timings. 5 minutes, say the 2-1-1. But Oliveira hit it like right around 5:45 with a composition that you're not used to seeing at that timing. And I'm not saying this is totally out of the meta, Nate. But Oliveira he had his slight wrinkle. And that meant that Classic, even though he thought he was prepared, Stalkers on the other side, cutting down Marauders, getting damage done that way. Immortals at home, sure, fine. Not quite prepared.
Yeah, I think again, it comes back to that information at the beginning. When you think about flexible openers for a Protoss, if you're not 100% sure what the Terran is doing, it's very hard to go wrong with blink obs. Just because with good control, if you're better than your opponent, you can deal with most situations. So hiding that info, then going for the big push, all anti-ground, kind of just left Classic in a position where it's like, yeah, he could blink on to him, but he just didn't have as much because he couldn't be certain enough to know what was going on to prepare everything. And Oliveira getting ready to move out again, but it's going to be a lot more sustainable of a push as he does have 2 medevacs finishing right as this army leaves his base. So holding that third is going to be quite tough. He's got 3 sentries coming over. Maybe try to just buy a little time with that.
I mean, I like the idea, and you force field the ramp, sure, but he's not even going to get a single Marine out of that. So, like, force fielding the ramp, sectioning off part of the army and saying, no, look, I got Colossus. I can clean this up. Well, you need a Colossus for that one, Nate. And Classic, he's got him on the way. First Colossus on the map, certainly, but not really enough just yet. So Oliveira, I mean, those are really good force fields. The SCVs in the pull are mostly going to get shut down even before things happen. And notice Classic, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but he left one gap for the SCVs, Marines, the smaller units. Will stream forward in a line, and then, well, there's going to be able to knock those down before the fight happens. Now, probes are going to get pulled into this, and with the shield battery overcharge, and this is still a ton of bio, though, from our Terran player, and even though the overcharge is decent, probes get pulled, sure, fine, the force fields were nice. There is not enough here. There is not nearly enough.
No, I feel like I've seen, this, I see this situation, Roddy talks about this all the time. It's like, yeah, if it's just Marauders left over versus just the Colossus left over, the Protoss is super dead, and the third base goes down again, but he just doesn't have the ability to take damage from that. Trying to kite against the Marines will do some work, but the Marauders and the tanks, there's not a clear answer for it. There's just not enough economy to get the charge lot count up that I think he needs, and once that cybernetics core gets popped, that's it. He's just stuck making nothing but Zealots and Colossus while he's contained on 2 bases. I guess the only real question becomes is there a possibility that Oliveira can overextend in this situation? Against 5 tanks, I'm not really super worried about it.
No, I mean, technically, Zealots against Tank Marauder are really good, so Zealot Colossus maybe isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's as much of a matter of supply as it is of tech, right?
Yeah, he needs like 10 gateways and a third base economy to be able to get enough Zealots out to just make all the tanks blow up the bio, right? But when he's only got 2 or 3 trickling out, it's never gonna have the even tanks can deal with the 3 Zealot push coming over here, and there it is. Overcharge is popped again on the shield battery, and GG is called. Oliveira is gonna score, well, perhaps one of our first, I did not see the map on the other one, but one of the first map wins here for DreamHack Dallas. Pretty exciting, huh, for EPT Dallas?
Well, ESL Masters Dallas, yeah, whatever it's called. I can tell you certainly that this is not our first upset of the day, because I'm told, and I didn't see the game because we're doing this, I'm told that Stats didn't just beat Clement game 1. The word I saw used was he dumpstered Clement game 1. Now,
ooh, there you go.
that's a strong statement.
Yeah, well, okay, so we are already starting off perfectly balanced then, right? We've got 1 map win for Protoss and 1 for Terran. There you go. Didn't expect the old Twistorino there. We got the lobby for game 2 going up. It was just nice to see, though. We get a little bit of cheeky mind games. We have Classic seemingly playing almost too middle of the road to be safe, and then it's like, boom, it's tanks and Marauders. Opening Stalkers isn't quite enough. So you have to wonder, what could he have even seen in that first game? What does he look for in a second game for something similar? And does Oliveira just say, well, now I'm going to do a regular 1-1-1, because if I do this wall off, you can't be certain if I'm going bio again?
I mean, yeah, I think that's fair. Three gate Colossus, which is what we saw Classic going for, into that third base. That's pretty safe. And looking back at it, I think one thing that you pointed out, Nate, is I think really key there is that, well, he got supply blocked for like 10 seconds right as that happened. Yeah. So he had a Colossus on the way. It was not allowed to come out. Against 3 tank bio like that, I don't know that a singular Colossus does enough. 3 tanks outside of a shield battery range, 1 shot at a Colossus, but at least it would have been something.
I think the other thing too, possibly related to the cancellation into the disruptor, was I guess there was a lot going on, but whether he had range at that point. Typically the Protoss player's first Colossus doesn't pop out with range. It usually maths out. If you start them both at the same time, you've got like what, 30 or 40 seconds after it's done, and then you have range, but that's only if it lines up perfectly. So I think any situation where you're relying on just 1 Colossus like that, I think that's where the no Medivacs helps. Like, instead of having 4 supply of Medivacs, he just has that extra tank or those extra couple Marauders. But yeah, that's just tough. Like, the Observer goes across, the Stalkers saw it, but yeah, it's just hard. It's hard to get everything out in time. The third racks, early 3 racks with no starport is a pretty risky push to go for too. Because if he gets caught, if his army gets caught in the middle of the map, if the Stalkers are able to get more than just 2 Marauders, then you don't have any way to retreat, right? You're just stimming home. So that's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, even then, getting a couple Marauders. You got 2 Marauders. I wouldn't be surprised if he got a couple Marines just that we saw that was off screen.
Yeah.
Even that is sometimes enough to hold a push. But again, when you're supply blocked like that, life becomes much, much harder. But Nate,
yeah,
we got a game 2. It's very exciting. It's Alcyone. It's the map that probably has given us some of the best maps, best games that we've had in the current ladder pool. So let's see now if we get another one of those. Game 2 on the way. And at the bottom left, in the red, down a map in this series, but certainly the Overdog. He's Classic. His opponent in the upper right, in the blue, quick timings, aggressive timings, tons of tanks, tons of bio, tons of victories for Dragon Kites of Gaming, the reigning world champion. It's Oliveira. Nate, were you, I assume you saw Katowice, right? When we saw Oliveira like break down on stage when he won the entire thing?
Oh yeah, I mean that was such an emotional moment too. He got Terran's first big dub like that, first world championship win in quite a few years, right? That was a big moment for the scene and for the space, and he just always came across as such a guy that like that was like the miracle run, right? He was almost fueled by the hopelessness of the situation, that there was no pressure, that he was like, okay, I have all these things that I want to do, I've got to go up against all the Titans, and then the map that basically brought him into what we would have called at that point his prime, right? When he, I think on the way up, had to take out Maru in that absolutely gnarly series, and people were like, oh my god, I can't believe that this final is actually going to be time, right, at the time, right? And Oliveira, he's absolutely carved a spot for himself as one of the Terrans to be feared way back when, I mean, talking talk WCS days, way back in StarCraft. It was a competitor from the Chinese scene that we had seen many different times, and he had been a regular competitor that we were all familiar with. But he was one of those guys that we would always say, he puts in the effort but can't quite make that jump. And it's been very awesome to see him do that recently.
Oh yeah, no, it's certainly, I mean, taking down Raynor, Hero, and Maru just back to back to back is probably one of the hardest runs. Not only one of the best stories, but one of the hardest runs that we've ever seen anyone go for. And reverse sweeping Raynor. I was in the crowd for that, and I'm like, man, he was crying, I was crying,
Crazy.
we were all crying. It was just
crazy,
incredible. But we should probably talk about this game, because that's a very quick Twilight coming out of Classic. Not the quickest, and not like he's gonna go all in off of this, but he has learned maybe from some mistakes in game number 1, and he's giving himself those tools, those opportunities, as quick as possible to make sure that he can handle maybe what's ever happening. But these Marines, Reapers on the map already. Damage on the Adept here makes it very hard for Classic to have any idea what's happening.
Yeah, that's a frustrating situation. Usually the Terran shows a lot of respect to the Adept. You stay back, you don't try to go too far ahead of it. The Protoss is waiting for an opportunity to shade behind you. But because he moved the Marines so far out, which if there was a Stalker out there, if he had chronoed the second one out fast enough, or if it had been there, that's a situation where you can get poked quite a bit, and it can turn into an overextension very quickly. But this is kind of what I want to see, is since it was the barracks opener, and we, with the eyes up here, we can see that it's straight to that 3 racks again for Oliveira. Taking any stance where you can be putting on enough pressure to know what your opponent has is still very nice. So whether he gets to do that or not still remains to be seen. There is a Cyclone waiting on the north side of the tower, and the Stalkers are kind of still just staying home to push the Reapers back. So how much of an inkling is he going to have that this is coming? Do we feel like just going with this setup is going to be enough? Is he going to be able to get that Colossus quickly enough if that's what he goes for again, Bayo?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? So for now, Classic's looking at 3-gate Blink Robo. So again, a little bit more defensive. You get 3 gateways, your Blink's going to be done soon. Robo, maybe we see that quick Robo base. It's going to be interesting. But by going, again, this delayed third base, more gateways, tack on Blink and all of that, theoretically, this is something that Classic should be able to hold. He's getting a lot more army units out early. That, again, means that you have stuff. But it's all about identification. It's all about not only understanding that you need to build stuff, but when do you need to build stuff? Are you actually spending those warp-in cycles on time as Classic? Or are you saying, look, I got my 3 gateways, but I don't need to spend them just yet because the attack's happening a little bit later. I'd rather get a third base. All of these things are questions, and for now, the Adept's not going to get up in the main base. And, to be honest, that number of Marines, Nate, is that enough to tell Classic that something's a little different?
Yeah, he had another Marine building in the Tech Lab barracks, canceled those, went back into the Marauders, and he's starting to beef it up a little bit more. I think he's just trying to manage his resources for that starport, but the Adept does get in and sees the starport is just finishing. So he's gotten an eye on the amount of bio units, but I still think that staying in his face, any types of little trades he can get, this is where he needs to make his money. You have Blink, you have the opportunity with the control to do really good things, but if he jumps up there at the wrong moment while those guys are waiting for him, then forced in Marauders will kill 8 Stalkers like nothing.
Yeah, and it should be pointed out that you said, it's 3 barracks again coming out of Oliveira. This is a marginally different build. This was 2nd and 3rd barracks roughly at the same time, rather than a 1 barracks, 2nd barracks getting that quicker stim, 3rd racks, starportless timing. This one's more classic, I guess, right? This is the 6-minute stim timing that we've seen so many Terrans take advantage of. It's very good against Stargate openers. It's still decent against other things, but again, the Stargate opener, that Oracle into Blink was what it was designed to take down. And now that Classic's able to put a little pressure on the map, right? Talk down a Cyclone, keep Oliveira back home, get some idea about what's happening. It does give him time to get set up, and that means that theoretically charge is going to be done or just about done by the time this attack happens. 1 Colossus already on the map, 2nd one's going to be ready, and this timing from Oliveira, he's got a lot of supply, Nate, certainly, but this is not nearly as scary of a situation as game 1 was.
No, he has a much better heads up of the situation. We were talking about the Colossus just finishing into the fight. Well, Extended Thermal Lance is about to finish, and he's got 2 Colossi. So as far as the setup goes, it doesn't get much better. The third base is already done. There's no, oh, I need to cancel it. I need to think about canceling it. It's just hold the door. And probably another big thing, especially on this map, you know, we've got the ramp right here that leads into this. So he has to decide, am I going to put myself between the natural and the third where I could get pinched, or am I going to go up this ramp where I could get force fielded? He had the drop split out. We saw him unload just to take the center position. There is an observer also watching the center still. But at the very least, Oliveira is going to be able to find some of the pylons stringed along outside of his base. That's a great way for Classic to get some vision without having to leave anything expensive behind. So he'll still see the right side if he goes out for another drop. We've got 3 Widow Mines in a medevac headed northwest. So I'll stay on the weather forecast for that. We'll see if things get a little gloomy over in Classic's natural soon. Some Zealots might accidentally run right past it though.
Well, at least that's a scout, you know, 2 ships in the night.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. So Classic sees it. Now, again, whether he saw it or reacts to it is a bit of a different question. But, you know, Nate, you talked about weather forecasts. We talked Widow Mines, of course, can be a problem. But Classic seems to be taking some inspiration from the weather we had getting into Dallas the other day, because there's the Templar Archives on the way. We are seeing more and more storm action get started here. I don't know whether he just wants to build a couple Archons, go for that push, maybe. But no, there we go. So Classic, hey, he saw the storms. He knows the turbulence that it took to get everyone down into Dallas. He said, yeah, that's my build order, guys. We're going to get stormed pretty quickly here.
Yeah, what's interesting about this is we have just the single forge setup, right? He's focusing into the attack upgrades for this. Typically, you'll see the gas dumped into the High Templar, a little more minerals into the Zealots. You kind of like the armor upgrades for those, but he's dropping down photon cannons, so he's not thinking about having his army playing too much of the defense here. He wants to be able to move out and try to get something done, and I kind of like that with this setup. With these Colossi going into the Immortal behind it, he's just going to have a ton of damage capabilities. That Prism, though, flies directly into 2 Vikings. It's so bizarre that he missed the pylon in the northeast, but the Prism finds the one spot where he actually could not go and does get cleaned up relatively easily. So Classic tries to go for a bit of harass, does get shut down, and we just have a little standoff in the center of the map. We've got the Mine and the Marine across from the Stalker, and he's like, I can't really fight you. You can't really deal with this Mine super easily. I mean, I guess maybe he could, but got a couple of weird things that have already happened in this match, Bayo.
Yeah, this is dancing around. This map is super broken, or sorry, the Zelnaga Tower is super broken for Terran. This drop's finally going to show up. Away there, cannons here. Probes are going to get pulled away. Stalkers get warped in. Damage. Still gets 7 probes. So yeah, 8 probes. There we go. So yeah, even though he was prep, Nate, and even though the Widow Mine has been nerfed, apparently it's still worth a lot of stuff here. I guess it's because there's this fight though.
They're still pretty good. I mean, the whole point is you can at least see what it's going to kill now, but goes for the main fight, and the shield battery overcharge with the storm just makes it so difficult for him to break through. It does get most of the Colossi, but when you're in a situation like this, it's more about, okay, I didn't take enough economic damage to stop me from taking my next step. So yeah, losing the Colossus hurts, but it only hurts so much if your opponent has an ability to capitalize on that. So for Oliveira, he's going to take the 4th. But Classic, he's already on 4 bases, so he's got the fleet beacon started up. He's going for +2. He's staying very focused on being able to take these big trades, all of the attack upgrades, and then as well as that fleet beacon, we've seen some of those. I've wanted to see it for so many years, and I like that it is now a thing in the last few years that Protoss finally do to Terran. But when they, you know, people say Marines are good, and they're not wrong. But most Terrans don't just make Marines if the Protoss builds enough Stargate, and that is often an Achilles heel of the bio playstyle. You end up not really being able to deal with those carriers or Tempest if they get to too high numbers while you're trying to use lots of Marauders and Medevacs, things that, while they're good, they just don't deal with air units.
Yeah, and you know, you say you're happy to see Protoss do this. This is something that's like uniquely Classic. I guess Estrella does it too, but this late game carrier transition to storm drops are gonna, oh, he's not pulling there. That is I actually thought it was gonna be more, but still 9 workers go down. But Classic is one of these few players that really enjoys going triple Stargate, going into carrier play, getting all this damage done. And, you know, it works out. I think this is something that he really enjoys doing in Alcyone, just because you kind of have that turtled up area in the 3rd base that you can take advantage of. And Oliveira, he's got maybe a good surround. Maybe it's a problem. It is actually going to be a good surround, but the recall is going to be there in time. I think a Stalker dies. A little scary. Will be fine. And now... Okay, so
he's like 2 seconds from losing his whole army there if he times that any later too.
Yeah, I was looking at it, I'm like, man, on the left
That was a big
side,
sandwich.
is that enough? But I didn't,
like, we got all the Caleris hitting from the east and west jokes ready, and he's just like, nope, I'm out.
There we go.
I'm heading out.
So,
and it is carriers. Got three.
+1's on the way. It is double starport Vikings, so it seems like Oliveira has something. I don't know if he scanned it out, but it seems like he's got some inkling that this is happening. And if you get to a critical mass, right, Nate, with carriers, or with Vikings, carriers really do struggle. But it needs a lot of Vikings to happen, and if your Viking micro is not on point, the carriers snap them down so quickly, and all of a sudden the fight is just untenable. So the game moves from this frenetic, rapid, oh man, that's a big storm, this frenetic, rapid multitasking thing to specifically, how good is your air control versus your opponents, and can you defend it properly?
Yeah, I think it heavily boils down to whether you can get an EMP, because even though the Vikings, the units will automatically try to target the carrier instead of just the interceptors nowadays, but you still have to be in range to do that, and that's where the High Templar become very, very, very frustrating to deal with. So I like the idea here, but there's been a lot of situations where we've seen the Terran response try to go into the Vikings, still stay, you know, with that heavy air force, and you kind of become more susceptible to the storm. So those ghosts still remain the clutch boys. I think if you're classic though, this is a great spot to be in. You're able to get all the tech that you want. You haven't been slowed down in your taking of bases. You've got the gold. He's got the southeast corner. And while the Terran does have a huge maxed out army, he doesn't feel comfortable enough to really be able to do anything with it. And well, we might have our first little engagement here as the Vikings gonna take one shot. And look at the defensive nuke bay. Okay, he's saying, yeah, come on over. Come on over. We got pizza coming. Just chill. No big deal.
Okay, he's gonna back up. Oh, man, he is staying there very long, but actually gets canceled, so no harm, no foul on that one.
As they go say first nuke of the tournament. Is he griefing him right now? Do we call the police? What is this?
This is I haven't seen Classic do this in a while, but this is distinctly Classic SkyToss thing. You put the Nexus forward so you can drop shield batteries with full energy on it, and it is actually super sick. It's incredibly expensive, but he's got the bang for it right now. And Classic just gonna try to attack into this. Man, the damage done to these Vikings so quickly is a problem. 17 Vikings still here. Storms go down on everything, and Oliveira's army is just kind of melting. Vikings are still there in the sky, but hey, look at these storms. They're annihilating everything, and even if the Vikings kill off everything on the sky, sure, fine. Their Warpins on the ground, the Archons, the Colossus are doing so much to this. Can the Vikings land and handle this? I don't think so.
I don't think so. There's another cursed factor to this. Okay, he did cancel the Nexus. I was going to say he has a warp prism here, so there was the option to warp in from that pylon within a Nexus range, which is another equally disturbing thing for the building one. But the third base is completely dislodged, and this is what we were talking about. The Vikings, yes, if they can attack the carriers directly in the Colossus, they can kill them. But against everything else, again, you're kind of throwing pebbles at them, right? You don't have a refined answer for it. You want to get back into your regular bio setup, but at the same time, there's still more carriers being made, so it's not quite that simple. We have additional Stargates getting added as well. Let's not forget some shield upgrades coming in. So these will be some of the first defensive upgrades for Classic all game. It's worth pointing out is his army has become easier to kill in a way as time has gone by, but now that will revert course a little.
Yeah, you got to be so careful with Colossus, with Storm. Their jobs, realistically, they're not to kill. I mean, if they kill, it's great, but their job is to soften, to make it so the Interceptors can do everything, to make it sure that the Bio and the Vikings, they can't just kind of stand their ground and take all the Interceptors out and then take out all the carriers, and that's the problem. So Oliveira is still in this game, technically. Still, he's got his... Hey, did he even lose the base? No, he didn't even lose the command center, so that's still there. He's still got 64 SCVs. The problem becomes, is like, how do you replace the army required to make this happen? And we talked about that. That base lasted maybe a little bit longer than it should have, but it's still very dead. But how do you build this army from Classic? Is so expensive. It's twice the gas, 1.5 times as big as the minerals. Even if you're still in the game as Oliveira, how do you replace an army that is technical enough to deal with what Classic's building?
I mean, if he had the infrastructure and the economy to switch into something, you know, like 5 starport battlecruiser, maybe Behemoth, I could see a universe. But we're looking at a game state now where Oliveira is more or less using less of the same tools he had in the first fight that he lost. Classic, on the other hand, has gained economy, his income has continued to increase, and his army remains pretty reasonably well balanced out in terms of how much he has of everything. So it's hard, but if he lands a juicy EMP and he can hit the Tempest, or excuse me, if he can hit the Mothership and the High Templar, and there's no abilities at all, and he gets a perfect surround, then he'll probably still die to the Lingering Storms or the Colossus in the meanwhile. But Zealots push that third base again, and yeah, Oliveira, all he can do is try to hold out long enough to get to 200 supply where he feels like he can try to force one last fight, and then that'll pretty much end up being it. But it's hard to look into this game and see a world where in 5 or 7 minutes, all of a sudden Oliveira's retaken all of these bases that he's lost.
Yeah, if you give a Terran an inch, they're going to take a mile. Mules are a powerful thing, and they give you this incredible comeback window that you might not otherwise have. But what are we looking at? It's 3 orbitals. That's not a ton. This is not a game where Terran's been able to... 3
orbitals would be enough. Don't get me wrong. He doesn't have an orbital at an actual secured base, right? Like, he has the third, hasn't been able to retake the gas, so it's just kind of an all-in position. He comes through, Ghosts do cloak, gets a couple EMPs onto the carriers. The time warp's going to come down onto the Vikings. And again, there is a great spread here, but this is the defender's advantage, so the Protoss is going to kick in too with the Zealots. Does he have no detection for the Ghosts? They're actually going kind of ham. Wow. But not enough. Not enough.
Going ham, but doesn't matter, right? Like, that was probably the best possible fight Oliveira was ever going to take. Big flank. He got EMPs early.
I was going to say, I feel like actually did get everything that we just discussed there. But yeah, he doesn't have the money to reinforce, right? And then Protoss, when Classic has thousands of minerals and gas and he can just warp in 20 supply of Zealots during the fight while you're kind of just going for your final push, it's never going to be a good time.
No, it doesn't really work out for you all that well, unfortunately. But it's actually really interesting as we take a look at this to see Classic going, or to see this game going. We saw Oliveira game 1. He got aggressive. He took the wool. He kneecapped Classic and never let him get to what he wanted. And then Classic game 2, granted, Alcyone, maybe a little bit more of a defensive map that lets you do that. He went and there was a 6-minute timing that never really showed itself. Granted, in fairness, when you go for that 6-minute time, you get a third base behind it, so it's not quite as all in as it might otherwise be. But anyway, you go for that, and you just let Classic get to the late game, and Oliveira cannot transition fast enough, can't take the good enough fight. Classic stomps him. But we move into Amphion for game 3 and 8. Amphion is a weird map. You got vertical spawns. You kind of have that
weird
third-ish. That's a little bit kind of an island, but not really. This is something that if Oliveira wants to go for it, should allow him to maybe get a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, this map just, in a way, you have the direct air path if that's the kind of strategy that you want to do. You have the whole east half of the map, like the whole right half of the map. That's where the one pathway is. You can open paths through the center and through the left side. But it's like you have to go kind of so far out of your way to go around. But even those fringe bases in the corner, sometimes we see people hide things, so you can get a little bit cheeky with it. But because it's not quite Crimson Court level, but you do have a huge amount of inaccessible space at the start without sending workers to mine out a zone. It does create a little bit more risk, right? If you want to try and proxy in that spot, you do have to send your workers down early to open it. So it's not as common of a strategy unless you're doing something crazy.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm just really excited to see what happens on it. Amphion is a map that you can get upsets. I think that's probably the best way to talk about it. Where we saw BattleB beat Clem is a really good example of that in the regionals. It's granted, we've had another couple weeks on the map. Players have been able to figure things out just a little bit more. Give me a second here. We had to restart StarCraft and
we're getting the lobby set up. But yeah, and Amphion, again, like you were saying, is just one of the more interesting maps. You have a lot of choke points, probably some of the most choke points in any map in the pool. It's quite a bit up there. It gives let me see, I'm just gonna let them know.
There we go. Just making sure that we had to restart StarCraft, but they'll be ready to go soon. There we go. We got the invite. We'll be ready to go. The other interesting thing about this, Amphion technically has a hybrid base. Technically, there are some gold minerals on the map, Nate, but I find it mattering. Estrella took so they have 2 of them, right? There's one on the far right side, way far away from things, and one kind of on the far close side. And Estrella did play kind of a Phoenix style, I think, against the Terran player, where he took that gold base, that hybrid base, which was really interesting. I don't know if that's what is going to happen, but I don't know that it's ever been relevant, but technically, you know, it technically exists.
Yeah, well, I think that this will probably shock you and stun you, Bayo, but I like to play macro games. I like a long, slow dance, you know, walk down the beach, watch the sunset. I'm not in a rush. And even I have never mind that gold base on Amphion because it is, yeah, I mean, you're right. First of all, it's not actually a full gold base. And then you don't have the extra gas there either. So is it even worth it? Is it even worth it, Bayo? It just sounds like a base that turns into only having 3 mineral patches very quickly. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, you know, that sounds like a great thing. We've heard that more minerals are better than less minerals, but Nate, I've heard more money.
Is it though?
I've heard more money, more problems. So
yeah, that's that. You see, that's true. If you have more minerals, people are going to say you're floating them. So you actually don't want to have them, even though they'll tell you to get more. It's a trap, I tell you.
Absolute trap travesty. But player trying to figure out whether it's a trap, whether it's a travesty, whether he can move on to face, I think, Stats now, as Stats took down Clem. In the bottom left, in the red, it's Classic.
And he faces off against our blue Terran in the Northwest. What a great way to start this tournament off. We get all the way to game 3. He is Oliveira.
You know, Nate, I know you've done a lot of work with Roddy in the past, certainly. But I gotta say, I'm so happy that this one part of Rotterdam, my experience casting with Rotterdam, has not rubbed off on you. And that is the fact that Roddy, whenever he and I cast together, whenever we cover like a day's worth of stuff in the regionals, every single game's a 2-0. So thank you.
Oh yeah, that's the curse. That's the curse. Yeah, exactly. He always gets the 2-0 games. If you're casting with me, typically we get I mean, if all things go as historically, it has been a while, so I'll put that out there. But if we go back to old trends, this game will turn into something similar to game 2, except it will be completely split. Oliveira will probably trade a little better on his first attack, and we ride this one 40 minutes into the sunset.
Nate, whisper sweet nothing into my ears. I love this. This is going to be the situation where, actually, you know, technically, the last minerals we're going to be a totally mined out map, and players are going to have to start to mine out these mineral walls, right, on the left, the right side, to scrounge the final Marine and the final Zealot to duke out in the middle of the map.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they throw down their weapons and use their bare fists, which is of course a very fair fight for the Marine versus the Zealot.
Man, talking about games like that, there was a game, Beyond versus Innovation, like 4 years ago, when Innovation was like making its comeback, kind of. Maybe that was actually before we went off to military. Anyways, this super late game on. It sounds like Golden Ore. It's not Golden Ore, right? It had gold minerals on conveyor belts. I forget what it was called. Anyways, you had that map, and it went down. Beyond wins the fight, but no one has any money anymore. Certainly no one has any gas. So Beyond just has this Viking fleet, and it's like Innovation's like, I got all these planetaries. Beyond, I need you to prove to me that your Vikings can kill my planetaries before I'm gonna leave the game. So Vikings land, planetary dies. He's like, okay, now I can leave.
Yeah, Vikings are pretty good. Ever since they got that mechanical damage, they're still a great unit for ending base trades in TVT, on the ground and in the air. So you have this setup again. The Adept kind of steps forward. The Reaper is ready to catch it on the back as it tries to trade with the Marines, and Oliveira, he's been punishing that early Adept, but we haven't quite seen it get picked off so quickly. And you know, for Classic, it's an awkward situation, but I feel like he's kind of gotten a read on this where Oliveira is going to have to switch things up. And hey, that third command center is way faster than we've seen so far, right?
Yeah, this means that we're probably not going to see that third barracks nearly as quickly as we saw in the first couple of games. So yes, second barracks, aggression, stim, timings, drop play, sure, fine. But with that third base, that does give Oliveira a little bit more room. And the question I ask, because this is Amphion, right? Amphion's such a weird map. Do you take that triangular pocket third? Is that your third base? Do you open that into a pushing avenue? And does that work if Classic takes the linear third? Because, you know, we see a lot of Terrans, I think. We take that, they mine through the wall, they go take that third. You can defend it with tanks, it's great. But we also see a lot of other, just in general, players taking that pocket third. And if Oliveira decides to take that third base, Classic takes that third base, that is a very quick avenue to go in and lean into Classic as quickly as possible.
Yeah, right. It's such an interesting thing because it's in a way it's a buffer for you and your opponent until one of you opens it up. But when one player opens it up, then it's like, okay, you get the entire advantage of it until the other guy does so. So it's like you don't really want to until you see your opponent go for it. But at the same time, all the things that you mentioned with holding that high ground can be nice. So I can completely see it from both sides. You worry about whether the lower rush distance towards your opponent too, if you expand towards them, ends up impacting it. And that low ground base feels nice. You can kind of just continue to expand straight down. You can have your whole army in front of it and cover most of the primary entrances, but that's when the prism backstabs you or they blink over that mineral wall. So all things you need to keep attention to, because I think as far as maps go, Bayo, this is probably one of the, just looking at the size of the space for what would constitute the natural expansion, it's about as big as we've really ever seen it. You know, even though most of the space is this huge area that leads towards the Reaper Cliff and the minerals, like it's still a lot of ground to cover if you're looking for a potential attack avenue.
Yeah, you know, I gotta say, as we look at this setup, I really like Oliveira's series play. Game 1, Game 2, Game 1 very aggressive, Game 2 semi-aggressive. He never pulls the trigger, but Classic has to respond to it. It's a 6-minute timing. And now here in Game 3, Classic, again, he's gone for this 3-gate Robo, 3-gate Colossus play, taking the third base a lot later than a lot of traditional, or a lot of, I guess, standard, maybe Terran or Protoss openers would go for. And Oliveira went for a very quick third base. So on the balance of things here, Oliveira has been able to just off the openers, off of the series planning, has been able to go and develop a pretty nice macro lead going into this game. And as well, Stalkers are going to try to knock some of these SCVs out to not let them mine. There's enough tanks here that is really, really hard. Now, Nate, we talk about macro leads and all of these things. The other way to look at this is Classic is so confident in his late game that he doesn't really care how he gets there so long as he gets there. This late game style. But for right now, Oliveira, 16 Marines on the flank on the left side. These Stalkers, they're trying to do as much as they can. They're not going to have a lot of room to retreat if Oliveira unloads, but yeah, okay, he's going to go for that one. Say bye-bye, Stalkers. They're gone. Bye-bye. No way.
I love, this is the second time he's done it too. He hasn't tried to send the medevac around the outside for the counterattack. He expects that Classic will have something there ready to defend, or he'll have warpins or something of the sort. But he just drops behind the Stalkers that are already on the field and says, I just want to take away your map control. I just want to punish you for trying to do this soft contain, for trying to poke me, delay this third base. And the observer there has been able to see more or less everything, but wasn't quite able to catch that. So now he sends out a few more Stalkers, and look at what's at his base. There's really not a lot. He's got 2 sentries, an immortal, 2 Colossi. And we know Colossi can be very strong, but they're not super fast. So the double drop eventually does find its way to the main base. And this is where it gets tricky, because the Terran army is not quite close enough to the third to go for it yet. But you have to assume at some point Oliveira is going to make the play for it.
Now, meanwhile, 4 Stalkers on the other side. So there's just a lot of damage happening everywhere. This drop, not really much to unload, but you're right, Nate. There's not a lot of this third base. Zealots are going to get warped in now. Overcharge his spot preemptively, but it's not doing anything. He's just going to target the base down. So the base is dead. Stalkers on the other side. I mean, they're not doing much damage anymore. And in the main base, this drop finds a little bit more. Can it get a... no Marauders. Probably not going to get the Colossus. What a beautiful minute and a half we saw at Oliveira.
Bayo, I'm going to call you out. You're the one who invoked Polt's name here. We had a man click on a Nexus with no regard for his own safety. And I think we're potentially about to see it again as Oliveira. Oliveira's like, you know, I think Bayo's right as well, is that he could do whatever he needs to get to that macro game, and then when you start to feel like the Classic is strong, is, you know, having the third get shut down, that was the worst thing that happened in game number 1 that really made it difficult for him because of how fast the push hit. But Oliveira has done a strategy now that says, if I play this straight up enough, I can beat you if we get to a similar place as last game. So for Classic, it's a huge opportunity, but he doesn't have that same comfortable window to move into that Stargate base play that we saw last game, because again, Oliveira is going to be looking for a much more traditional timing to try and make a big attack is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's important to point out here as well. So not only did we have a base snipe for Classic, his Forge was sniped. +1 is not on the map. He actually hasn't rebuilt the Forge yet, so that's not going to happen. Forge is now on the way. Gateways are depowered. So yes, technically he's got 6 gateways. He can only warp in out of 5 of them. Classic wants to go for an attack because it feels like he kind of needs to go for an attack, as this Prism is not going to get anything done. Great shutdown on the Vikings. But realistically, unless Oliveira is insanely out of position, which he really isn't, he's got missile turrets, he's got tanks, he's got his bio rotating over. It doesn't, and he's gonna knock down the rocks. The Classic started anyways. Yeah, I want to chase you down. It doesn't really feel like Classic has an avenue to get this aggression going like he would like. Maybe if Storm finishes, right? We do have a Ghost to catch. Actually, we got Ghost on the field. What am I saying? The Storm is not this miracle timing that it was in the last time. Although, if you get all the Ghosts like that, that's a pretty good start.
And he's trying to zone a little bit, but if he loses even just one Colossus here, that's quite catastrophic. The bio is spreading out a lot. That Storm you were talking about, Bayo, it's still not done. He's going to just start morphing Archons in the middle of the fight, and it just turns into the Immortal and the two Colossi trying to hold everything. Probes are getting pulled once again. We know those don't do anything against Terran. You're not pulling the probes in this matchup. It's not going to happen. And well, things go from okay, kind of figuring it out, stabilizing the game, to my third got sniped, my +1 got sniped. I've got unupgraded charge lots fighting against 1-1 bio with another 4 siege tanks supporting, and things go from bad to worse here for Classic. He's going to tap out Oliveira with our first series win here on the B stream.